There are three things you can do to help us out.
1, you can make sure you subscribe to this channel.
2 is you can leave a comment here or on Apple Podcasts.
And 3, if you really want to help, you can follow this link to see how you could be a supporter on Patreon.
Word in Your Attic, a Zoom with a view.
So welcome to another Word in Your Attic, and here we're delighted to join hands, and via the 2 cocoa tins and a piece of string that is now known as the internet, we can actually go over to Boise, Idaho, and Curtis Stigers. Hello, Curtis.
Very good to see you.
Hello. It's lovely to be in your attics.
Yeah, absolutely. And so tell us a little bit about Boise, Idaho for a start, because you were born in Hollywood, but raised in Boise, Idaho. Is that right? How's that work?
I was. Well, there was a hospital that was in Hollywood. I actually lived east of there in a little town east of Los Angeles called Temple City. But Hollywood looks good on a CV, right? On a bio. But my mother was from Idaho. Idaho's in the northwest part of the United States. Most people in the United States think it's in the Midwest. They think it's farther out east, but we're pretty close to Oregon, and but in the middle of nowhere. My mother was from here originally, and after the divorce, when I was about 8, we moved back to her hometown, Boise, Idaho, and I was furious because my grandfather lived in Los Angeles, and my grandparents, and he used to take me to Disneyland and to all these wonderful things that Los Angeles had to offer. And suddenly I was living in this place that it had things like mountains.
Yes, I gotta say, it's fairly mountainous.
It is the home of Paul Revere and the Raiders, surely.
It is. It is indeed. It took me a while to learn that, but actually, I am the godfather of Paul Revere's granddaughter. Lily Revere is my goddaughter. I knew Paul well, and I know his daughter just lives a block from here. It's amazing.
That's excellent. So Idaho, tell us, Idaho must be mentioned in some American popular songs. I couldn't think of any. Go on, tell us.
Well, there's that it's 5 o'clock in Boise, Idaho. I think it's a Leonard Skinner song. What is that?
Right.
Oh, right.
Anyway, that's just about it. Actually, there's an old standard called Idaho, way beyond the hills of Idaho, where da 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 da, and that's kind of, that was known at one point. There's a place called Sun Valley, Idaho, about 3 hours northeast of here, which was the first kind of big American ski resort back in the 30s and 40s. And people like Gary Cooper and Ernest Hemingway and Marilyn Monroe and fancy people like that used to go. So it had its sort of chic cachet at a certain point. These days, Idaho is a very conservative place, far too conservative for my tastes, but the town of Boise itself is this little hub of sort of regular people that, or at least what I consider to be regular people.
Okay.
Well, Roger Miller was meant to have written King of the Road, wasn't he, in a hotel in Boise?
That is right. Yeah. He is meant to have, and who knows, it could be an apocryphal story, but he's meant to have written King of the Road while sitting in his hotel room at the Idaho Hotel at the corner of 10th and Main. I'm going to say it's true.
Absolutely.
So we usually start with a question about the record playing equipment in your home. Can you remember what records were played? What equipment they were played on, and also what records were playing actually
when you were a child?
Home, yeah.
When I was a child, it's only just a couple of years back. We had one of those big console stereos, it was a piece of furniture, not something you could move at all, and eventually it ended up down in my bedroom, which was in the basement. And it had a turntable, and it had an 8-track cassette player.
Wow!
And yeah, we were going deep with the 8-track, and I did listen to a lot of 8-track music when I was a kid. My mom was a rock and roller, but so Little Richard is her favorite, and Jerry Lee Lewis and all of that stuff. But she eventually kind of mellowed into a more of a Neil Diamond, John Denver sort of a place, as you know, as you do. Although whenever Little Richard would come on, she would scream and dance and become a schoolgirl again. But so I listened to Hot August Night, the Neil Diamond,
absolutely.
On 8-track over and over again when I was very young. And you know, I can still do a great Neil Diamond. I can sing "Love on the Rocks," ain't no surprise. I can do it because I listened to him so much. He stuck with me. And in later years, as I've mellowed a bit, I've been able to go back and listen to Neil Diamond and think, yeah, the guy was very talented, you know. But there was, when I was listening to punk rock and playing drums in a punk rock band, you know, the idea that I once listened to Neil Diamond was
he was a bit overwrought from time to time, wasn't he, Neil Diamond? Particularly at the time of Hot August Night. If I remember correctly, it has one of the most unfortunate pictures on the cover, where he appears as if he's kind of trying to show off a giant erection of some kind. Honestly, in your own time, viewers, go and have a look at this.
Well, you know, I mean, you go with your strengths.
Like Transformer.
So, can you remember what the first record was that you ever bought?
Indeed,
do you still have it? Go on.
I don't have that copy. I mean, it might be somewhere in a box moldering under my mother's house. I was never very good with stuff. I collected things and then I went on to the next thing. And so my brother ended up inheriting a lot of my records and he probably destroyed them as well. But Goodbye Yellow Brick Road by Elton John was the first album I bought.
Right,
I would have
Benny
been
and the Jets.
Yeah. Oh, and that was the reason I bought the album. Benny and the Jets was massive.
Yeah.
I was living in Southern California still. I was probably, I think I was 7 or 8. I was just I was a kid, but that song killed me. And then I bought that album, and it was Elton, and that album in particular. He was so perfect for a young budding musician, because he was like a cartoon character. He was flamboyant. He dressed up. He had all these get-ups. The album itself had lots of it had artwork. It had
picture to go with every song, didn't it?
Every song, yeah. And so that was huge. And back then, you know, you had an album, so you got to read all the liner notes. So as a third grader, as a little kid, I'm looking at, Gus Dudgeon produced this record. Well, what does a producer do? I had no idea for another 10 years what a producer did, or a little less than that, but still the idea there was a producer and there was a guy who played the arp, whatever that was. And, Nigel Olsson played drums and Dee Murray on bass. Eventually, immediately Elton John was my hero, and my hero through my life, quite frankly. I've become friendly with him.
Played with him? You've been on stage with him? Yeah.
Indeed, I've opened
Must have been
for
overpowering.
him. It was crazy. The first time I opened for Elton and Eric Clapton and Bonnie Raitt at Wembley Stadium the summer of '92 for 3 nights, and then I did a couple more dates with Elton and Eric, and quite a few with just Eric. But that first night on stage at Wembley, first of all by myself in front of all those people playing my songs, but then at the end of the night we all took the stage and did an encore with him. Oh, and also he asked me from the first night, he was very kind to me right off the bat, to play saxophone on The Bitch's Back. Now, The Bitch's Back, Caribou was another, I memorized his albums. And so I just walked on stage having never played The Bitch's Back on saxophone. And I basically knew the solo that Lenny Pickett played by heart, just because I had it was osmosis, right? It was something that I just knew. So Goodbye Yellow Brick Road was really important. All of his records up until Blue Moves, that was kind of the last record that I was an uber fan. But the one that killed me was Captain Fantastic.
Yes.
And this is not my original copy. My daughter, my dear sweet daughter, who's 21 now, 3 or 4 or 5 years ago, she gave this to me for my birthday. She knew that I didn't have it, and she knew.
Oh, really? Oh, that's very sweet.
And it had not one but 2 booklets. That, with all this great, again, when you're a kid, when this came out in what
75, I think 74, 75.
Yeah. Let's see, 75 exactly. So I was 10, and so there's all this, all this great artwork that drew my eyes. But the songs on that record reference a lot of Britain, a lot of England, and a lot of Elton, Bernie lyrics. I didn't know what a lot of it meant. I didn't know. There's a line in is it Bitter Fingers? I think that's the one about writing. It's about them writing songs, and somebody from the publishing company says, maybe you'll write a Standard Lads. And I didn't. A Standard Lads. I thought that was a thing. A Standard Lads. Oh, we're going to write a Standard. But he was saying, write a standard, lads.
Yeah.
And so it took me. I mean, honestly, that took me maybe 25 years to realize. Oh, he was just saying Standard Lads. And there are just a lot of great mentions of pubs and things.
Yes.
And I have since a very young age been a
you're a huge Anglophile, aren't you?
I am indeed. I mean, the humor and the musicians.
You tweet about things like even the BBC license and stuff, but you were a big Python fan, weren't you? And isn't that right?
Yeah, at about the same time that I discovered British music, I discovered Monty Python. Now they were played on television on sort of what would be like BBC 4 or something. It was very the arts channel, and then at 11:30 at night on a Sunday. And this is well past when the things were made. These are obviously replays years later in the mid 70s. But my friends and I noticed that there was this thing that happened at 11:30 on Sunday night, and it was just unlike anything else. Of course, I mean, I'm sure it was the same for you there, but you at least had you had stuff leading up to it that
they were English and we knew where they'd come from. Exactly.
We had no idea.
They came from space.
It was fantastic. So whenever I could find a Monty Python record, I think I owned Matching Tie and Handkerchief, and anyway,
which only had 3 tracks on it, didn't it? No, it had an extra track, didn't it? Didn't you? On the second side there was a double spiral.
Right. I don't even. Do you remember what it was? Do you remember?
I can't remember, but you put it down. It would play one of 2 15-minute tracks. Absolutely incredible.
Curtis, you've passed one very important test. Being an American who doesn't talk about Monty Python.
Yeah,
which
Americans always do. Monty Python, which always sounds really strange to an English ear. we all say.
We also spell rumor without a U. Without a second.
That's right.
So we do a lot of things strangely over here.
So when did you first start playing music? When did you join a band? When did that first happen?
I was I started playing. The first thing I played was clarinet in the school band, and that would have been in 5th grade. So that's like about not long after I bought Captain Fantastic, probably 76. And I started playing clarinet because my cousin Diane had played it in high school, and she just graduated high school and didn't play it anymore. I wanted to play drums, or I wanted to play trumpet, something, sort of boyish. And instead I played clarinet, which I ended up loving, and I got good at it. I played all through school. It also led me to saxophone, which is, the sort of the other thing that I do besides singing. I realized that there wasn't that much clarinet in pop music and music that I listened to. And so I was trying to find something that fit. There was one guy who played clarinet on records that I owned, John Anthony Hellawell of Supertramp, the Supertramp. And he played saxophone, but he also played clarinet on some things. There's a song called School from Crime of the Century that had this lovely long clarinet solo that I learned by ear, when I was just a kid. So I started playing when I was 11 at school. The next year I got a drum kit, and that really changed my life. I was able to really play with the records that I loved. And
so was this the punk rock period you were talking about?
This was pre-punk rock.
Right.
When I got my drum kit, I was still into, I was starting to get into prog rock. I spent I spent a period, like a lot of young musicians do, listening to Yes and Emerson, Lake and Palmer, and
working out the time signatures.
Exactly. And so I learned to play
I think
drums.
you'll find that's in 1916.
but only until the third measure when it switches to.
That's right. That's right. Exactly.
But it definitely it appealed to the young musician in me. It appealed to, look how they put that together and that together. At the same time, I was listening to jazz, and I was loving pop music still. I still loved Elton John as I was getting into all of that. And I also discovered Led Zeppelin about that time. There was a box of records in my basement. My mother's friend, Susie, I don't remember her last name, but Susie moved out of town, and she left some of her stuff with my mother in the basement. And one of the things that she left, or two of the things, were 2 milk crates full of LPs. And among other records, I found this record.
Oh, what?
Yeah.
What a happy milk crate that proved to
Yeah,
be.
good work.
It was an amazing
You've
milk
covered
crate.
some Steely Dan songs too, haven't you?
Well, only playing live. I've never actually caught. I mean, the idea of playing, of like recording a Steely Dan song.
No, that's pointless. It's pointless.
They did it. They did it. You know, I mean, they did it. Why do it again? You know. But I have. I mean, in my youth in particular, I had a little jazz trio when I was working in New York, actually where I got signed, the restaurant where all the record companies came out and found me. We were playing, you know, it was just acoustic bass, acoustic piano, and I was singing and playing sax. But we would now and then pull out a Steely. We'd play Black Cow by Steely Dan, or we'd play a song by Donald Fagen, and then we'd play a Duke Ellington tune, and then we'd play one of my tunes, and then we'd play an Al Green song, which is sort of where my career has eventually led me.
Yeah,
is back there. I mean, I make records like that now. That's what I do. I cover, you know, I cover my own songs. I write songs still, but I also cover my old songs live. So I'll play I Wonder Why, but I'll play it, you know, as though it's a jazz tune that we've just taken apart and put back together as jazz, the same way I do with Steely Dan, the same way jazz musicians do with standards, with songs that come from Broadway or the West End. You just take them apart, put them back together with different chords and with a different sort of approach.
We must go back to the punk rock bit in the middle minute, but very quickly, Clive Davis did sign you in that restaurant, in that bar, didn't it? Wasn't Clive Davis of Anarchy was there and saw you? Yeah,
Wilson's Restaurant. He was brought there. The A&R man that you know, I met some sort of lower level A&R people at different gigs that I did, but there was one woman who just happened to be at Wilson's Restaurant on West 79th Street in New York, and she introduced me to an attorney who introduced me to 7 or 8 labels. I mean, by the time I signed my deal, I had 6 or 7 offers for record deals with the big majors. It was amazing to have gone from, you know, I mean, I was eating pizza to stay alive and riding the subways to work and getting home at 3 a.m. after doing a couple of gigs. And then suddenly there's Clive Davis sitting in the audience. And then there's the head of A&R from Epic Records. It was mad. It was a hell of a lot of fun.
And within about a year, you had a colossal hit, didn't you?
Yeah, it took, let's see, I got signed in 90. The record came out in late 91, or maybe I got signed in late 89, but I spent 6, 7, 8 months writing more songs for the record. And that's when I met Barry Mann of Mann and Weil. Barry Mann, we wrote Never Saw a Miracle for my first record. And Barry Mann, along with his wife, Cynthia Weil, are Mann and Weil. They wrote You've Lost That Love and Feeling and We Got to Get Out of This Place and every other. I mean, they wrote so many huge hits, and I got to spend several afternoons with him just hanging out in his studio writing songs. That was heaven. That was
what did you learn from senior songwriters? Is there any key lesson you learned?
Well, to listen, to not try to run the show. You know, the one of the things I learned about co-writing, and I'm best at co-writing, I'd say. I mean, I write songs on my own, and you know, some of them are all right, but I like the give and take. I like to bounce a lyric off somebody or a melody off somebody and have them say, yes, but, and that's something, you know, I guess it's kind of like improv comedy, you know, it's that yes and, as opposed to no, that sucks, but. And I wrote with some writers, some big writers who were more like that. No, that's terrible, do this.
Yes.
and I didn't record their songs.
Right.
Or we usually didn't finish those songs. What I like about writing is the camaraderie, the hanging out in a room, drinking too much coffee and getting excited about something and knocking something into shape. Barry, you know, he pushed me around and said, no, that's a little bit too hackneyed. You know, there was a line in one song about, I had a line about, you know, you took my last thin dime. And he's like, yeah, no, that's been done before. We did that. We did that in 63. So that was nice to have somebody.
And Carole King, you wrote with Carole King too.
Carole, yeah.
So what was that? That's fascinating. What was that like?
That was heaven. She's everything you'd want Carole King to be. She's beautiful. She's smart. She's funny. She's tough as nails. But she's also the sweet hippie chick. She's very politically active, very fiercely liberal, and into the environment and rivers and mountains. I adore her. So we wrote a song. I met her after my first record. I recorded one of her tunes for an album called Tapestry Revisited, which isn't maybe my favorite album in the world. It was a collection of other people doing songs from Tapestry. There were a few standout good tracks, and then a lot of stuff that I sort of think, well, why did they do it that way? But it was of a time, and but I recorded a song of hers called Home Again, rather rocked out, sort of rocky soul version of, and she liked it and contacted me, and we connected and eventually wrote a few songs together, one of which made it onto my third album. The album is called what is that called? It's called Brighter Days, and the song is it's about a bus trip from Natchez, Mississippi to New Orleans for some reason. It was something that I had in my head, but she started playing the piano, and it was like being on in the studio for Tapestry. Just the way she plays piano is so Carole. Do 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 do. I mean, it was really amazing. And she pushed me as well. She'd say things like, well, you have a tendency to do this with your songs or your lyrics or your melodies. This is what I think is a better way to do that. And I mean, I was there to learn. I'm still here doing this because I want to learn. I want to get better. I'm 56 now. I want to be better when I'm 60. I want to be even better when I'm 70. Why not get better doing this? Why not learn more things?
Your new album, which comes out in February, I think starts with another version of a song that's played a big part in your career and Nick Lowe's career. Is that fair to say? Tell us about this.
It's very fair to say. Yeah, I back in '92, right after my first album came out, I got a call from Clive Davis, saying he wanted me to record a song for this to the soundtrack to a movie that was going to be coming out very shortly, called The Bodyguard. Whitney Houston, Kevin Costner. So I wrote half a dozen songs over a month period. I mean, I was desperately trying to find a song that Clive would say, that's it. And Clive was always busting my chops about my songs, and none of them were right. They were all wrong. And eventually the track that I did record appears in the movie for about this long. And it sounds like this. I mean, this is exactly what it sounds like. And that's it. That's how much you hear the song in the movie. It's on the other side of a wall. She's in the dressing room. There's a band playing in the club next door, and you can just hear. That's it. But it ended up on the album, so that was the important thing. So it wouldn't have mattered if it was, Mary Had a Little Lamb, quite frankly.
Yeah.
But he was very tough about it. At the same time, I'm touring with Elton John and Eric Clapton. We played Shea Stadium and Dodger Stadium as well during that tour, and I was finishing all my shows with a song by Elvis Costello, as far as I was concerned, because that's where I actually pulled out a copy of this of this album too, just since this was our attic.
Yes.
Oh, right. Armed Forces.
Armed Forces is the album that Elvis did, the iconic, the great, the perfect version of What's So Funny About Peace, Love, and Understanding. I loved that song, and I knew it was a Nick Lowe song, but I just thought of it as this Elvis Costello song I was doing more as a rhythm and blues rave up at the end of my sets, because my first album didn't have a lot of up-tempo stuff. I needed something to finish off the set. The end of the show, Clive comes backstage in the it's Shea Stadium, for God's sake, where the Beatles played. And he comes back into the visitors' dressing room, visitors' locker room, where that was my dressing room. And he comes back and he says, "That last song, what was that? It was perfect. That's the song for it." By the way, this is how Clive talks. He has kind of a fake British accent. He grew up in Brooklyn, and he talked like that when he was a kid. But anyway, so I said, "Well, sure. What a great, I get to do one of the coolest songs ever written." And a year later, when that record started selling in the millions, and Nick Lowe started getting checks, I got a call from Nick Lowe out of the blue. And he called to say thank you so much. And he ended up making over $1 million on it.
Have you ever talked to him before?
I had never talked to him.
No, because he's told that story many times, hasn't he, David? It's so sweet.
Yes.
Literally, he tells it in a way that it's just one single brown manila envelope that plops
with $1 million.
With $1.7 million or something. And he just thinks, wow. It goes down to the off license and buys quite a reasonable claret,
Something.
It transformed your life to some extent, didn't it, that record? I mean, my God, it went on to sell 40 million, actually, I think.
45 now worldwide.
45.
He just keeps going. Yeah, it's amazing. So I'm sure Nick keeps getting the checks. I stopped getting checks long ago. What I found was that being on the label of that album, being on the same label as Whitney Houston, it meant that they were able to cross collateralize. It's a word that these record companies. So they ended up spending a lot of that money on things for my next record. Clive ended up making me record my second record 3 or 4 times. He kept saying, "No, it's all wrong." So it cost over $1 million. All came out of my.
I can well imagine that. Oh my goodness!
When I left Arista, I was still in a red position. I still actually owe Arista Records money when I left in 97 or whatever. But what are you going to do? I mean, I don't do this for money, clearly, because the records I make.
Your new record is it your own label? It's got a rather amusing name for the label.
Well, actually, they're in the UK and the rest of the world, everywhere but North America. It's on Universal. I'm signed to Universal in Berlin these days, the Universal Jazz in Berlin, and so it's there. But here in the States, I was able to get the rights back to it so that I could promote it myself. I just felt like I could do a better job, and I've hired different companies to help me. I basically have my own little record label, which is not easy. But the album, or the record label, is called Pandemic Poodle Album, or Pandemic Poodle Records, and that comes from. I spent the last 2 years sitting in my kitchen waiting for the pandemic to end. I mean, I make a living as a touring artist, and that's what I do. That's who I am. And I'm sitting here in my kitchen wondering what the hell I'm going to do. I'm not making any money. I put a record out during the pandemic. I realized I needed to get my music out there, just to touch people, just to communicate with people. So I started a Patreon. You gentlemen know what Patreon is, of course. I noticed. I started that. It didn't work as well for me because I found that there were only 150 people getting to see all this stuff I was making, and it drove me crazy. I wanted everyone to see it and hear it. So I canned the Patreon thing, and I just started doing a live stream show called Songs from My Kitchen, and I make little videos for that.
Your dogs feature very prominently.
I was so impressed. Fantastic. Was it you did another Nick Lowe song, Lately I've Let Things Slide, which is just a wonderful, wonderful song.
What a great song.
And you're on a very nice sofa in a very nice living room with what appear to be 2 kind of dog-shaped cushions either side of you.
3 actually at that point.
And I thought, how cute! He's got dog-shaped cushions.
Cushions.
Suddenly, one of these cushions just looked up. It goes, we singing again, and then
that's exactly that's Louis. That's Louis, our Portuguese water dog, and he does that. It's so amazing. Just as I'm going into the bridge, he just sort of looks up and like, yeah, I think he played that chord wrong, and then he puts his head back down. It's just like they got used to me being he's like, oh Jesus, there he goes with this singing again. I had a lot of fun with my dogs during pandemic. That's my wife runs a homeless shelter, so she was out saving the world most of the time.
I see.
While I was so I'm sitting at home with the dogs making these silly videos and doing this live stream, and we learned how to make videos, my dogs and I. They're not super high quality, but they're
very good. They're very good. We'll put a link here under this. You've also another string to your bow is you've been involved in a lot of the music for Sons of Anarchy, which is a very, if I may say so, rather unlikely for somebody with your musical background to end up doing a lot of music for a series about biker gangs.
Was that what you did, John the Revelator? Was that?
Yes.
It was a wonderful decision to do that.
Oh, I love that. Well, my dear old friend and often a collaborator of mine, a guy called Bob Thiel Jr., who's, just a quick aside, his father is Bob Thiel, who produced most of the big Coltrane records on Impulse, Bob Thiel. He is a co-writer on What a Wonderful World, the Louis Armstrong, the big Louis Armstrong song. He co-wrote that. Well, Bob Thiel Jr. and I have been writing songs together since the mid 90s, and he co-produced Brighter Days, my album. He called me up, it's been 12 or 13 years ago, and said, hey, if you're off the road, could you write a lyric for me? Dave Kushner and I just wrote the music to the theme song to this new TV show that I'm this music supervisor for. And I said, well, yeah. So what's the show about? And he said, bloodthirsty, gun-running bikers. And I said, well, no wonder you called me.
Yes.
But I mean, I grew up playing the blues. I grew up playing in blues bands, and this particular song, which is called "This Life," the theme song, was basically that, a blues rock song. And then we were nominated for an Emmy Award for writing it. The TV award. It turned out to be quite a cool thing. I didn't make a lot of money because it was on cable. It's not even a paid cable. So much like it's sort of the story of my life. Somebody made a lot of money off of that show, but I made some new fans, and I got to do some other things for the show. As you said, John the Revelator, which we borrowed the Sun House version.
Absolutely.
That acapella version of
where he
Sun
slaps
House.
His knee,
slapping his knee. Fantastic.
Yes,
it's the only accompaniment.
Amazing. And he's on TV and he looks so uncomfortable. It's like, this is not where you can just tell they just said, go stand there now, do your song. And but he kills it. There's so much humanity in that track. And so they suggested, the producer suggested that we do that. And God, it was fun. I loved my opportunities on that. And I got to play live with them a few times. We did some touring with it, but it was just one of those things that happened in a show business moment. And then I went on and went back to making my weird jazz records.
So you're starting touring the UK in February. Yes. Are people going to hear a wide range of this kind of material?
They always do. This new album is a look back. It's a look back at 30 years of making records, and even before. There's a song an arrangement that I was doing even before I made records. So I've re-recorded I Wonder Why, but we do it entirely different now. I play with a jazz quartet, so it sounds. I mean, it's still the same song. It's got the same bones, the same whatever, but it's a different thing. And I did that with the hits. I did that with the song from Sons of Anarchy, This Life. So we do all of that stuff. And then I grabbed
Gershwin
songs
on
from
there,
my
isn't
different
there?
records.
I think Gershwin and
there's
Leonard Cohen.
Summertime.
Yeah, Dave and I have been watching you've done quite a few Dylan covers, which are
Indeed.
fantastic. Things
Indeed,
have changed. Your
yeah.
version of Things Have Changed is absolutely brilliant. What's the attraction with? There's quite a lot of Dylan. You did I'll Be Your Baby Tonight and various other things.
I mean, what's wrong with we're recording songs by the greatest songwriter ever?
Yeah.
I mean, Dylan's fantastic, and he just keeps reinventing what he does, and he keeps telling partial truths about himself.
Yes.
I mean, I love him as a fan, as a kid still. I just love that you never really know when he's being serious, both in his music and in his life, and when he's making stuff up. I mean, that documentary that Scorsese did not long ago, where there were three characters in that documentary that were actually fictional characters.
Yeah.
And
there's a bit where he's asked about where he gets the white face makeup on the Rolling Thunder tour, and he says he'd seen Kiss in a bar in New York or something. And it's just absolutely brilliant. He just invents characters, doesn't he?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. And he invented himself, and that's
he did.
Yes, absolutely right.
What's more rock and roll than that? Just
Joni Mitchell famously said, when people were talking about Joni Mitchell in her 70s, whatever, about whether she could sing like she did when in her 20s. And she said, well, it's all right for Bob because he's got that guy to sing the songs. I thought it was a really interesting point.
Yes.
He kind of made up a character.
He did.
It's like an actor might make, like Marlon Brando made up a character to be.
He did. You're so right. And there have been more than one Bobs.
Oh yeah.
There's been more than one Bob. Right. I mean, think about it. There's the early, that Bob.
Yeah.
And then he sort of took that.
It sums up about 6 years beautifully.
I know, but then you listen to Lay Lady Lay. I mean, when he was doing when he went to Nashville and made that country record, made Nashville Skyline, it's like you sing like this. I mean, he put on a whole new personality,
fruity voice.
And then out of nowhere, years later, he starts singing like this. But he can. I've heard him kind of go back and not sing like that. It's clearly it's like playing a different instrument for him. I think, I mean, he'd probably say, "What do you know, kid? You don't know nothing. Shut up, damn pop singer."
One thing I love the idea that he's probably, that he's doing all that stuff, and he's probably happy at home welding strange things out of kind of old gates. And, it's just so peculiar.
Well, I mean, but that guy, I mean, how long he's on the road so much. I mean, I've always thought, God, if I were Bob Dylan, I'd just be on the beach. I mean, I would to have written all those songs, to have made all that money, and then he's still out there playing wherever they'll let him play. I love that.
You can't imagine him having an evening at home, Bob Dylan. You can't see him in a sofa with a book. You just can't. Can't
watching
imagine
Netflix. Watching Netflix.
He just has to have. It's like B.B. King. B.B. King retired in his 70s and then came back because he didn't know what to do.
He went up in the early 90s, didn't he? I think.
What's he going to do?
I've got to ask you a practical question, Curtis. I've got your dates here in starting in the UK on Thursday, February the 24th. You're playing at Ronnie's at 6:30 in the evening. Is this right?
Yeah, they've because of COVID, they moved everything forward. The last time we played there for the first time since the lockdowns and everything in September, and that was hard to get used to. Luckily, it's so dark in Ronnie's, you don't know that it's still. No,
I think it's quite a good thing, that people want to come straight from work or whatever. They don't want to be hanging around for hours,
It used to be. I mean, when I first played Ronnie's, they were still having us start the late show on weekends at midnight, and that was a bit much for me. I'm a lot of fun, but by midnight I want to be into the second. I'm less fun. I'm into the second bottle of wine. It is earlier this time. When we play 2 shows per night, we play the 24th, 25th, 26th, 27th. Yes. The album comes out on the 25th, so the second night there is the album launch. I'm excited to be at Ronnie's is sort of my second home. We've been playing there for nearly a decade, a couple of times a year, and it's it's home. The people who work there are our family, and the people who come to see us come every year, and they buy a lot of champagne, which allows Ronnie Scott to
pleases
bring
Ronnie's. I'm
Yes,
sure you'll have to learn to do. I was at Ronnie's only the other week to see Elvis Costello do a kind of press conference prior to his new record.
Yeah.
And he got on the stage and he said, somebody said to him, "You must have been here loads of times before." And he said, "Yes, I was sitting at that table when I saw so-and-so and so-and-so." And then he proceeded to tell a story about seeing so-and-so. I was sitting at that table. I thought that's such a clever trick. That is.
Yes.
Gets people's attention immediately.
Absolutely. Yeah.
It's an amazing room. It's an amazing room to hear music. I've been there for many great shows. I could point out where I saw so-and-so and so.
Well, you
and so.
should do that.
Introduced by Ronnie Scott himself.
What's that?
Were you ever introduced by Ronnie Scott himself?
The first time I played Ronnie was still alive, and it was for my first album. It was the first time I played in London. It was just a press and industry showcase. I was playing, my pop music with my band with hair and guitars and really loud. And I see the office is behind the stage. There's a door that just kind of sneaks in right at the edge of the stage. And I see this older gentleman walking across the room, and I realize, oh my God, that's Ronnie Scott. And he walks up onto the stage. He looks over, he goes, and he walks in because we're playing, one of my guitar players used to basically dress as though he was in Spinal Tap. It was definitely of a time. It's early 90s. We all looked a certain way. And here's Ronnie Scott. He's just like, oh God, piss off. And he just walks in, and that was it. So that was my introduction. That was the only time I ever saw Ronnie Scott in the flesh. Later on, when I started coming back playing jazz music, Ronnie was already gone. Pete King was still there, but most of the time that I've played at Ronnie's, it's been owned by Sally Green, and she's done a wonderful job with it. It's just so it's all that old coolness. It's the red banquette seating, and it's the best looking jazz club in the world. I mean, better than any New York jazz club. It's the coolest jazz club in my opinion, but it's not smoky. I mean, and that was not smoky before the laws, came into effect that you couldn't smoke anywhere. It's a good place for a singer to sing. Whereas when it was smoky, it was a hard place.
So that you start your run there on February the 24th. The album's called.
It's called This Life. It's named
called
after the
This
Sons
Life.
of Anarchy. It's about my life. It's about my life as a recording artist, and so it seemed like a good enough title. And then I'm back in the UK from mid-March through mid-April, doing a full-on tour, theaters around the country, vlogging the album, and finally getting back out on the road and doing what I do, what I love to do.
It's nice to be able to say to somebody after all this time, the old traditional sign-off, good luck with the tour.
Oh, yes. Thank you. That's really nice to hear, and thank you so much.
So your greatest record.
We traditionally finish by getting people to tell us what's the greatest record ever made. Do you know, Curtis Stigers?
Well, this is a question that could kill me. I could just wrap myself into existential knots thinking about it, because of course there's no such thing. I mean, if influential record, sure, maybe it's Sgt. Pepper's. I love that album, but is it the greatest? I don't know. Sometimes when I'm listening to a new album by somebody that you've never heard of, like Jason Isbell or Hayes Carl, I'll think, God, this is the best record I've ever heard. But what I came to was a record that goes so far back that I can get away with saying it's the greatest record ever made, because I love this album and it moves me every time I hear it.
Yeah.
Ray Charles, Modern Sounds in Country and Western Music, which when I was a kid, I saw this album cover and I thought, what a terrible idea. Why is Ray Charles singing country music? And then you put the record on and it's perfect. It's Ray at his greatest, at the peak of his singing powers and his playing powers and arranging powers, with a big band singing some of the coolest songs I've ever written. You know, brilliant songs, "Bye Bye Love," you know, by the Everly Brothers, and "You Don't Know Me," and it's it's just such a good record. Every time I put it on, I think, why don't I just listen to this album every day? Why am I not just listening to this full time?
And of course, he made sure he owned the masters, didn't he, Ray Charles?
Smarter
man,
yeah.
than anybody else.
Smart man, yeah. I finally learned that lesson. I now, these last two albums, I own the masters of these albums. I finally took Ray Charles's advice and stopped giving my music to the man.
Curtis, it's been wonderful talking to you.
Really a treat. Thank you.
And
a lot of fun.
I think.
Word in Your Attic, a Zoom with a View.